August 1969. The International Hotel, Las Vegas. Elvis Presley stood backstage in a white jumpsuit, listening to the crowd beyond the curtain. 57 shows. 2 months. Same stage. Same songs. Same city. He had just proven the world wrong. The '68 comeback special reminded everyone who he was. The king hadn't died. He'd been sleeping. And now every label, every promoter, every tour manager in the world wanted him back on the road. But Elvis said no. He chose Vegas. He chose repetition. He chose safety. And in that choice, he built the cage that would quietly take everything from him. This is not a story about Colonel Parker. This is not about conspiracy or control. This is about one decision that felt right in the moment, and the slow, invisible price Elvis paid for choosing comfort over freedom. Why did Elvis Presley, at the height of his second rise, choose to stay still? To understand why Elvis chose Vegas, you have to understand what he feared most. It wasn't failure. It wasn't irrelevance. It wasn't even aging. Elvis feared chaos. In 1958, his mother Gladys died while he was in Germany. She was the only person who had ever made him feel safe. When she was gone, Elvis lost his center. He didn't know how to process grief. He didn't know how to be alone. So he built systems, routines, structures that told him when to wake, when to eat, when to perform, when to sleep. The army gave him that. Marriage gave him that. Graceland gave him that. But the road was unpredictable. Different cities, different crowds, different beds, no control, no patterns, just movement. For most artists, that freedom is oxygen. For Elvis, it felt like drowning. So when the Vegas offer came in 1969, it wasn't just about money. It wasn't about Parker pushing him into it. It was about something deeper. Vegas meant repetition. Vegas meant the same room, the same crew, the same rhythm every night. It meant Elvis could perform without risk. He could be great without being surprised. And after the chaos of the '60s, after the bad movies, the divorce, the uncertainty, Elvis wanted to feel safe again. So he said yes. But there was another reason Elvis chose Vegas, one he never spoke about. The road meant exposure. It meant walking into cities where people might not show up. It meant the possibility of empty seats, bad reviews, proof that maybe the comeback special was a fluke. Vegas eliminated that risk. In Vegas, the seats were always full. The contract guaranteed it. Success was built into the structure. He didn't have to prove himself night after night in different towns. He just had to show up. And for a man who had spent the 1960s watching his relevance fade, that guarantee felt like salvation. The Las Vegas residency wasn't a trap. It was a promise. Elvis would perform twice a night, 7 days a week, for 2 months straight. Then a break. Then another 2 months. Year after year. The same stage. The same orchestra. The same lighting cues. It was predictable. And for Elvis, that felt like peace. In the beginning, it worked. The shows were electric. Elvis was sharp, engaged, present. He joked with the audience. He changed the set list. He felt alive. But something else was happening beneath the surface. Without the randomness of the road, without new cities and new faces, Elvis stopped needing to adapt. He stopped needing to stay curious. The structure that had felt like safety began to feel like a script. And once you're following a script, you're no longer creating. You're repeating. At first, Elvis didn't notice. The crowd still roared. The reviews were still good. He told himself he was doing what he loved. But the truth is, he wasn't performing anymore. He was executing. Night after night, the same songs in the same order, the same jokes, the same movements. Even his spontaneity became rehearsed. The karate kicks came at the same moment. The scarf-giving ritual happened on cue. The gospel medley always followed the ballad section. And when life becomes a loop, something inside you starts to flatten. The audience didn't see it. They saw Elvis Presley, larger than life, dripping with jewels and sweat under the spotlight. They saw the myth, but the band saw something else. They saw a man who no longer looked at them during songs, a man whose eyes had gone somewhere distant. Elvis had always been present. That was his gift. When he sang, he meant it. When he moved, he felt it. But now, in Vegas, he was somewhere else. He was performing a performance. And worse, he knew it. What made it even more insidious was that the structure worked. Financially, professionally, logistically, it all worked. The shows sold out. The money poured in. The headlines stayed positive. There was no crisis to force a change. No disaster to wake him up. Just a slow, steady erosion of the thing that had made him Elvis in the first place. The unpredictability. The danger. The electricity of not knowing what would happen next. In 1956, when Elvis walked onto the Ed Sullivan stage, nobody knew what he would do. Not even Elvis. That's what made it magic. In Vegas, everyone knew exactly what he would do. Because he'd done it yesterday, and the day before, and the day before that. By 1972, Elvis was still filling seats. But the man on stage wasn't the same man who had walked out in 1969. He wasn't bored. Boredom implies awareness. Elvis was something else. He was numb. The pills didn't start as addiction. They started as architecture. Uppers to match the energy of the schedule. Downers to come back down when the adrenaline refused to fade. Sleep aids to force rest. Pain pills to keep the body moving when it wanted to stop. The pills weren't about escape. They were about control. They were about keeping the machine running on time. But here's what no one tells you about routine. It doesn't just organize your day. It reorganizes your mind. When you do the same thing every day, your brain stops processing it as experience. It becomes reflex. And when performance becomes reflex, emotion fades. Elvis wasn't high on stage. He was somewhere else entirely. He was watching himself perform. He was a passenger in his own body. The audience saw Elvis Presley, but Elvis saw a man going through motions he no longer remembered choosing. And the worst part, he couldn't stop, because stopping would mean admitting the decision was wrong. Stopping would mean chaos again. Stopping would mean he had wasted years inside a loop he built himself. So he kept going. 2 shows a night. Same songs, same stage, same city. And every night, a little more of him disappeared. There's a specific kind of exhaustion that comes from repetition. It's not physical. It's not even mental. It's spiritual. It's the exhaustion of doing something that once had meaning, over and over, until the meaning drains out completely. Elvis felt it first in his voice. Not the power, he could still hit the notes, but the intention behind them. He used to sing "Can't Help Falling in Love" like he was saying goodbye to someone he'd never see again. Now he sang it because it was 10:47 p.m., and that's when that song happened. He felt it in his body. The jumpsuit weighed 20 pounds. The lights were too hot. His knees hurt from the same moves he'd been doing for years. But he couldn't change them. The audience expected them. The rhythm of the show demanded them. He felt it in his relationships. Friends became employees. Conversations became logistics. Everyone around him was there to maintain the schedule, not to break it. And most of all, he felt it in the silence. After the show, after the crowd left, after the lights went down, Elvis would sit alone in his dressing room. Not tired, not relieved, just empty. Because when you spend every night pretending to feel something, eventually you forget how to feel anything at all. The people around Elvis started noticing small things. He stopped asking questions. He stopped talking about new songs he wanted to record. He stopped wondering what the audience thought. He just showed up, performed, and left. In the early days, Elvis would stay after shows, talking with fans, signing autographs, soaking in the energy. By 1974, he went straight to his suite, alone, with the pills that would let him sleep, and the pills that would wake him up in time for the next show. The loop had become a narcotic itself, more powerful than any chemical. It promised that tomorrow would be exactly like today. No surprises, no risks, no pain, but also no growth, no discovery, no life. And the cruelest part? The audience never stopped loving him. They kept coming. They kept cheering. They kept telling him he was great. So Elvis had no reason to believe anything was wrong, except for the feeling he couldn't shake. The feeling that he was dying in front of thousands of people who thought they were watching him live. By 1977, Elvis knew. He didn't say it out loud. He didn't tell anyone, but he knew. He had chosen wrong. Not because Vegas was evil, not because Parker forced him, but because he had traded freedom for safety, and safety had turned into a cage so comfortable he didn't realize he was trapped until it was too late. There's a moment in every person's life when you realize you can't go back, that the path you chose has become the only path you know, that even if you wanted to leave, you wouldn't know where to go. Elvis had that moment in Vegas. He was 42 years old. He was performing the same songs he'd been singing for 8 years. His body hurt. His voice cracked. The crowd still cheered. But he could feel it. They weren't cheering for him. They were cheering for a memory. And he was the one keeping that memory alive. There was no villain in this story. No betrayal. No conspiracy. Just time and choice, and the slow weight of repetition. In his final years, people close to Elvis noticed something strange. He stopped talking about the future. He stopped making plans. Not because he was depressed exactly, but because the future had become indistinguishable from the present. Tomorrow would be another show, another hotel room, another pill to sleep, another pill to wake, another performance of a life he'd stopped living years ago. The tragedy wasn't that Elvis wanted to quit. The tragedy was that he didn't know how. The loop had become his identity. Without it, who was he? A man who used to be Elvis Presley. A man who once mattered. So he stayed. Not because he loved it. Not because he needed the money. But because leaving would mean confronting the emptiness that the routine had been covering up all along. There's a recording from one of Elvis's last Vegas shows. You can hear it in his voice. Not exhaustion, not anger, but resignation. He's singing My Way, and when he gets to the line regrets I've had a few, he pauses, just for a second. And in that pause you can hear everything he never said. He had built a life where every moment was scheduled, where spontaneity was eliminated, where risk was engineered out of existence, and in doing so he had eliminated himself. Elvis Presley didn't die because of pills. He didn't die because of Parker. He didn't die because of fame. He died because he chose safety over risk. And once you make that choice, it's almost impossible to unmake it. We all do this. We build routines that feel like protection. We choose the predictable over the uncertain. We tell ourselves it's about stability, about control, about being smart. But comfort has a cost. And sometimes, by the time you realize what you've lost, the loop is all you have left. Elvis stood on that Vegas stage for the last time in December 1976. The lights came down, the crowd left, the curtain closed, and in the silence that followed, there was no applause, no encore, just a man walking off stage, knowing he would do it all again tomorrow. Because that's what the loop does. It doesn't trap you with force, it traps you with repetition, until you forget there was ever another way to live. The question isn't whether Elvis could have chosen differently. The question is whether any of us can recognize the moment when safety stops protecting us and starts erasing us. Elvis made his choice in 1969. He thought he was choosing peace, but what he really chose was slow disappearance. And by the time he understood that, the stage lights had already defined him. The routine had already claimed him. The loop had already won. Think about your own life for a moment. Think about the routines you've built, the patterns you follow, the safety you've chosen. Are they serving you, or are you serving them? Elvis couldn't answer that question, not honestly, because to answer it would have meant dismantling everything he'd spent 8 years building. And at 42, with the world still watching, that felt impossible. So he kept performing, kept taking the pills, kept walking onto that stage. Until one day, in August 1977, his body finally did what his mind couldn't. It stopped. Elvis Presley's story isn't a cautionary tale about fame or excess or bad management. It's a quieter warning about something far more common: the danger of choosing comfort when your soul needs chaos, the risk of building a life so predictable that you disappear inside it. In his final months, Elvis would sometimes stand at the window of his Graceland bedroom, looking out at the gates where fans gathered every day. They came to see him, to be near him, to touch the legend. But Elvis wasn't at the gates. He was behind them, separated by walls he'd built himself, walls that had once felt like protection but had become a prison. The saddest part? The gates were never locked. He could have walked through them at any time, could have gotten in a car and driven, could have broken the loop, could have chosen chaos over comfort, risk over routine, life over the slow death of repetition. But he didn't, because by then the loop wasn't just his schedule, it was his identity, and leaving would have meant becoming someone he no longer knew how to be. So he stayed, and the routine continued, and the man who had once changed the world became a prisoner of the safety he'd chosen. That's the real tragedy of Elvis Presley. Not that he died young, but that he stopped living long before his heart stopped beating. And the question that remains, the one that echoes through every sold-out show, every repeated performance, every silent dressing room is this: how many of us are doing exactly the same thing, one safe choice at a time,